Well, it's been 2 years now, almost 3 years since the ill-fated May 25th, 2020, the night of George Floyd. Wow, that ill-fated night where George Floyd died and the world erupted into riots everywhere. We got curfews installed on us, and the world basically changed after George Floyd's death and this whole incident. But ever since that night, I got to tell you, I was always suspicious because at this point, as a researcher, as someone who understands the deep state long enough now, I understand how psyops work, and I can smell through a false flag like no other. And so the moment that this happened, I was already suspicious of it because things just didn't seem right about it. Things just didn't add up about it. And every time that there's a big event like this and they're so quick to go through problem, reaction, solution with all the talking points already, the media talking point, the government talking points, and boom, blame it on white people. You got to be suspect of it. You got to look a little bit deeper into it. So what really happened the night of George Floyd and his death? What really happened in this whole incident? I have an incredible researcher, documentarian, and director with me, Miriam Heinen, who's made this incredible documentary called The Real Timeline that goes through the whole timeline of what really happened with George Floyd and all of this unseen footage, and a lot of footage that most people just haven't either had time to look or they haven't been able to string it all together, but she has done it in an incredible way. So welcome to Shots Fired, Miriam. How are you?
Yay, I'm happy to be here with you, Deanna. I
Awesome.
came on a couple of times with Stu when I first started researching this PSYOP 2.5 years ago. Unfortunately, real investigations take time, so I'm only dropping this now, and it goes with a book that I haven't yet finished called George Floyd, a multi-layered PSYOP exam.
Wow. That's incredible. So, I mean, a lot of people, really wanted to research extensively George Floyd and look at all of the footage that came out and the store footage at the store that he was at before and the innocent bystanders footage with their little cameras. I wanted so desperately to go through all that, but I just didn't really have the time. But the little bits that I saw here and there were not making sense, and they really screamed false flag to me. But what made you decide to go down this rabbit hole and go really analyze this whole thing much deeper than most people have?
I was actually in the jungle because I've been covering medical safety since 2012 as a real journalist, and
Wow.
left to Costa Rica, and I was with Zach Voorhees, the Google whistleblower.
Yeah, he's amazing.
Yes, he is. And it was May 25th, and he asked me, he said, Mimi, which is my nickname, can you come and choke me? And I'm like, what? And so he said, I'm doing the George Floyd challenge.
Mm.
And so from there, I tentatively pressed down on his neck and he could still speak and breathe. And I started calling, I called the medical examiner. I called one of his George Floyd's employers.
Mm-hmm.
And it was really as a journalist trying to find out why they were lying. I'll say that George Floyd taught me a lot. And of course, yes, I knew about, let's say, 9/11 and JFK and all the other false flags, but to really try to understand how it all works, what's real, what's not, because as you said, this is the event that brought us from virus to violence overnight and prolonged the lockdowns and ushered in a color revolution. So while people may have fatigue, unfortunately, they haven't seen the event like this. And why is it that I can do a way better job than all these FBI investigators and the police and the courts? You have to wonder.
Right. So you went down this rabbit hole. Your documentary is entitled The Real Timeline.
Yes.
And you believe, as do I, that this whole event sparked the color revolution. And meaning, okay, we went from, oh my gosh, we have to be so afraid of COVID and wear masks and we have to wait for our vaccine and isolate from other people and everything, all of a sudden, and it was starting to fade a little bit, that concern, but then all of a sudden, boom, what just happened here in the world? George Floyd just died, and there's riots everywhere, and violent riots, and people screaming, I can't breathe, this mantra. We got people blaming cops and saying now this whole cop narrative, cops are bad, especially white cops, white people. Black people are good and need to be revered no matter what. We have holograms erected of George Floyd.
Right.
He has gotten into like God status with people. And this just happened over. And then all of a sudden, by the way, we forget about COVID because people can riot and protest when it comes to George Floyd. And that's not social distancing required. That's not spreading, no concern for COVID there. So COVID just got erased basically overnight.
Yeah.
But any protests about the lockdowns, of course, got a social distance. That's not allowed. So when I see an event like this, whether it's a shooting and then they go problem, shooting, reaction, oh my God, this is terrible. Look at the kids, look at the people, look at the footage. And then the solution, gun control. Just like this would happen with here, I get suspicious.
Absolutely. We're living in a Hegelian world. And I say in the film, we're living in the golden age of fakery. And I would go as far as to say they even use this incident to get more jabs into the arms of the number one vaccine hesitant population, which is the Black community. Oh, look, the government cares about racism. And I found NIH studies that were looking to Black Lives Matter messaging to take and apply to get to decrease vaccine hesitancy in the number one population that's, questioning this jab from hell as they should be. So, yeah, I'd go as far as to say my book is it's called A Multi-Layered PSYOP Examined, and so I just lay it out. It's very matter of fact and it's full of information. I didn't, for instance, I didn't think that I would befriend Maurice Lester Hall, who's with George Floyd that day. And so when you learn the family didn't even meet with Maurice, and the family didn't even go and get his belongings. Teresa Scott, his roommate, George Floyd's roommate, told me they never even went by to get his belongings. Why is that?
That's bizarre. If you're a family member, wouldn't you want to be with or talk to the last person that saw your beloved family member alive?
Right. I would. So that doesn't make sense. And of course, all the millions and millions and millions they raised using GoFundMe, which as far as I'm concerned is a money laundering tool. You have to wonder. People don't realize they might have George Floyd fatigue, but the impact just in the duty to intervene laws having to do with the police have been changed throughout the country. There's very real repercussions. Derek's oral appeal was just televised last week. And so this continues to be in the headlines, whether people like it or not. One of the aims was to keep George Floyd in the headlines as much as possible. And if I were to ask you, Deanna, who put together the funerals, would you know that it's the government, the United States government? So while we were burying people via effing Zoom, George Floyd had 4 funerals with a golden casket and horses and a carriage.
Right. And then there are so many things that were just weird in there, and I'm going to go through some of them.
Yeah.
But weren't they like bouncing the gold, the gold coffin as well, and almost like dancing at the funeral? Like that was odd to me. At this point, I've seen enough false flags where I'm pretty good at spotting crisis actors. And there's a look, okay? There's like this kind of dead in the eyes look where I can tell this is a CIA farm grown crisis actor.
Right.
It's a look, and it looks like an actor. And when you really look at, if you're not based and you don't know this, that the news lies to you, you'd be like, what are you talking about? But if you've studied these false flags and you see every time there's a shooting or something, we have the witnesses come up and the lines that they use, their reactions, when you look at it, they look like actors. They seem fake. So I was wondering from the very beginning, first of all, just a question, was George Floyd even dead? Is George Floyd an actual real person?
Yeah.